Hi, Lauren. Hello. We suddenly jumped from the winter to the summer. Hi, it's officially 7 o'clock now, but people might still joining us, so maybe we can wait for one more minute. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Okay, maybe we can just start. Okay, I will stay here from 7 to 9. I will go through some concepts. I think those are important, and I would like to remind you. And later, I can answer any questions you raise from the practice final or from wherever. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Wait. Okay. Share screen. Okay, here we are. Everyone can see it, right? The slides. Can you see my slides on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Show. Okay, let me remind you for the very last time. We are going to have the multiple choices or true false questions. There are 2 hours unless you have accommodation. Altogether 100 questions, and each one carries 1 point. So in total, there are 100 points. And the 100 points will be converted in proportion to the 40% of your final grade. So here, we cover the chapters 5, 6, 3, and 4. Chapter 3 only contains certain key concepts and nothing more than that. But we will focus on the categorical proposition, categorical syllogism, and also informal fallacies. First, the categorical propositions. It talks about a group of objects, which we call category. And the categorical propositions is a proposition that relates to terms. The first term comes is the subject term, and the second term comes is the predicate term. So we have the four standard forms, but this time, right now, you should really familiar with them. A, E, I, O, O as a P, some as a P, no as a P, some as a not P. So for each of the proposition, categorical proposition, we have the quantity and quality. Quantity is universal or particular. Quality is affirmative or negative. You will see the questions asking you to, hey, here is a proposition, change the quantity, but not the quality, or change the quality, but not the quantity, or change both. We did it as exercise in class. Concerning the quantity, we have the quantifiers. Nothing more than the three words, or no, or some. And for are and are not, we call them coupler. It's just the names of the terminology, nothing special. But here, something special is about the modern square of opposition. We have two squares. One is the modern square, the other is the traditional square. In modern square, there is only one thing you need to be reminded, the contradictories. Those propositions on the diagonals A and O or E and I, those are contradictories. Means if one is false, the other is true. One is true, the other is false. And what makes the distinction between the modern and the traditional interpretations is the existential import. It means whether we presuppose those categories, those sets are empty or not. So in modern interpretation, there is no existential import. If I say O as a P, I only mean if something is S, then this thing is P. Recall what we studied before the midterm. Well, if the antecedent of a conditional is false, then the whole conditional statement is true. Okay, so this is the modern interpretation, and it only affects the universal propositions, A propositions and E propositions. See this? Is this modern or traditional? Okay, I've labeled here. It's modern interpretation because we have no assumption about whether there must be something called S. What we know is there is nothing outside P of S. And here, there is nothing in the overlapping area of S and P. But for traditional, we presuppose there is something exist in the category of those terms referred to, unless later we checked out and found, okay, there couldn't be anything. For example, round square, or the current king of France, something like that, we can check and we realize, okay, there's nothing under the name. But otherwise, we have the presupposition to be joined as the circled cross here, means we have the presupposition that there is something here, O as a P, because this part, the left-hand side, is O empty, so it can only occur in the middle. Likewise, for the E proposition, we have these two little circled crosses, means that S and P, both are supposed to be not empty. But that interpretations, the distinction between these two interpretations only affect the universal propositions. For particular propositions, you see, they are themselves claiming that there exists something. We do not have to presuppose. And that's why the Venn diagrams for the particular propositions are the same under the two interpretations. Here, we have the definition. Immediate argument is one premise, one conclusion. And immediate argument is more than one premise and, of course, one conclusion. Now, can you recall which is the kind of diagram that is linked to the immediate argument in chapter 3? What's the conceptual relations? Someone said in the chat, let me take a look. Yes, Danny is right. Those are simple diagrams from one premise to one conclusion, immediate argument. Okay. So now we have the important ideas of conversion, obversion, and contraposition. You need to know how they are generated. Conversion is we just change the positions of the subject term and the predicate term, switch them. And you can see, okay, to make a conversion valid from something to its to the converted proposition, the diagram needs to be symmetric. You see, because we just switch the two positions. If it is symmetric, then after the changing, the diagram is the same. So of course valid. And that is the case for propositions E and I here. And for A and O, okay, they are not valid. Also remember those diagrams because it can help you to do the translations from the propositions to propositions and therefore from arguments to arguments. Obversion is we change quality first and then put nan to the predicate term. Obvertent proposition and the obverse proposition. Okay, we see from these arguments, those are for immediate arguments. And the special thing about them is obversion always gives you valid arguments. Or if we consider the propositions instead of the arguments, you can see that obversions always give you the logically equivalent expressions. O as a P is equivalent to no as an NP. No as a P is equivalent to O as an NP, so on and so forth. We can use them to do the translations. And also contraposition from the given proposition to the contrapositive proposition. And that is we first switch the predicate term and the subject term, and then put nan to each of them. Look at this. So if it is A proposition, after the change, we got the same. If it O, then also the same. And what makes a difference is the E propositions and I propositions. Now you can see the interesting link is if something is valid in the conversion case, then it is not valid in the contraposition case. If it is valid in the contraposition case, then it is not valid in the conversion. This is just summary rule by observation, and obversion is the best. It always gives you the valid ones. Okay. Then from the traditional interpretation, we get the idea of contradictories. This is also from the modern interpretation, but contraries, subcontraries, subordination. This is restricted to the traditional interpretation. Because from the modern interpretation, there is no existential import. We do not have much information can help us to establish those relations. So look at this, AEIO. Again, from modern interpretation, the modern square, we have A and O to be contradictories, E and I to be contradictories. And now, here, A and E, we call them contraries because they cannot be both true, but they can be both false. And I and O to be subcontraries, it means they can be both false, but cannot be both true. Oh, sorry, they cannot be both false, but can be both true. And from A to I to A, if A is true, then I is true. And if I is false, A is false. And so is the relationship between E and O. This is the universal particular relationship. A says all dogs are animals, and I says some dogs are animals. If you draw the Venn diagram, you can see that we have the little circled cross that guarantees that whenever the term is not empty, you can have the circled cross to be a real cross. Okay, so from this, in the traditional interpretation, we also have the conversion by limitation for A propositions and the contraposition by limitation for E propositions. A propositions is we first get the corresponding particular proposition, some as a P, and then we do the conversion of this some as a P, some P as S. And for the E proposition, we have no S a P, and again we first find out the corresponding particular proposition, some S and no P, and then do the contraposition of this, some non P and non S. Those give you valid argument, that those validity are only from the existential import which is carried by the traditional interpretation. And that's why we call them valid by limitation. Okay, you can see this is the version in traditional interpretation. And again, it always gives you the valid argument. Okay, now here comes the difficult part of translation. How do we translate the ordinary language into the categorical propositions? We see there are singular propositions asserting something about a specific thing. Those are proper names of person, of animals, of places, of countries, and there can be definite descriptions, the current president of the United States. And for them, we use the so-called parameters, persons, places, things, events, times, cases. For example, Clarice is tired. So it's to be translated into all persons identical to Clarice. Actually, it's me, but we need this form. All persons identical to Clarice is tired, are tired people. For tired, it's adjective, so we need to put the noun, tired people or tired persons. And for wherever, anywhere, we use places that. For temporal, we never, always, anytime, we use times that, and also persons who and things that. Those are just the tools to help you to make them fit into the forms that the categorical syllogism requires. So you can see some expressions might be a little bit weird, but we can ignore them. And also we have missing quantifiers. Sharks are dangerous. If I understand this appropriately, it means I'm talking about the all sharks, the kind of the animal shark. So it's all sharks are dangerous animals. A professor is not a machine. Again, I'm not talking about some particular professor. I'm talking about the entire group of professors. So it should be no professors are machines instead of all professors are not machines. Remember that OS and not P is not a standard form. And also not every philosopher, not every something. It means some philosophers are not miserable person. A few philosophers are miserable. It means some philosophers are miserable person. This is not every and a few. Okay, recall this is we just talked about the modern square. For it is false that it is not true that it is not the case that we're actually expressing the contradictory of something. So we can first find out what is after this. It is false, it is not true, after those operators, and then use the modern square to give you the correct result. For example, it is not the case that all dogs are smart. We first find out all dogs are smart, A proposition. The contradictory to A proposition is O proposition. So it should be the O proposition having the same predicate term and the subject term. That's some dogs are not smart animals. Another example, some apple, it is false that some apples are sweet. Sweet is adjective, so it should be sweet atoms. And I proposition to E proposition. So it is false that some apples are sweet. Means no apples are sweet things or sweet atoms. You can just use this square. Well, also in class, we talk about conditionals, how to translate conditionals. If A, then B. It's all cases that A happens are cases that B happens. And sometimes you need to adjust the words. A happens, or actually X is in A, or depends on what the A and B are. If A, then not B. So O, A, and not B. But actually, we have it to be put into A proposition. So that's no cases that A happens, no cases that B happens. B, if A. To think about this, you need to think about how to make it into the standard form of conditionals. So this is if A, then B. Then we know how to do if A, then B. And here, one of the most difficult part be only if A. Only if means what follows only if is the consequent of the conditional. So B only if A is if B then A. And if not A then not B is if B then A. That's the transposition rule. Not A unless B. Okay, this need to be think carefully. So not A unless B. It could be interpreted as not A or B. And that is also logically equivalent to if A then B, or if not B then not A. So by using these relations, you can translate those conditional expressions in our ordinary language into the standard form of the conditionals. If A then B, then you can naturally translate it into the categorical proposition, all A are B, or all cases that A are cases that B. Well, there are also some other difficult words like this only. Cats are on the table, so all things on the table are cats. The only A or B. The only strange animals are cats means all strange animals are cats. Or cats are the only strange animals. Still, all strange animals are cats. O except as. Now we need two categorical propositions to translate it because it contains more information than what can be contained in a single categorical proposition. So O except as a P. For example, all except Clarice are invited to the party. It means I'm not invited, but everyone else are invited. So this is no as a P and O non as a P. A alone is the B, means there is an identical relationship between A and B to be put into categorical forms. It's OA at B and OB are A. And only a few A are B means some A are B and some A are not B. Well, actually, we talk about all of those translations in class. So you can go back to see those slides to find out the concrete examples. Then we move to the chapter 6, categorical propositions. To determine the minor term, major term, and middle term, we always start with the conclusion. Because for the premises, you may later need to adjust the orders of the sentences, but for the conclusion, there's only one conclusion. And for this only one conclusion, it has the subject term and it has the predicate term, depending on which term comes first. So you can find the subject term of the conclusion is the minor term, and the predicate term of the conclusion is the major term. What is left is the middle term. So in this case, the major premise is the premise containing the major term, and it must be put in the first line. And minor premise is the premise that contains the minor term, and it should be put in the second line. Okay, so now we have three propositions. Each one could be A or E or I or O. We put the three letters of each proposition's type in order: major premise, minor premise, conclusion. Then this is the mood of the categorical syllogism. And also we have the figure depending on the position of the middle terms of the middle terms. So figure 1, 2, and 3, and 4. If we are given the mood and figure, we can uniquely decide what syllogism it is like. If you have done the practice final, you will see the questions ask you to determine which part is missing in the mood and figure to make it a valid syllogism. Actually, you need to check the form. but you can use rules, the 6 rules, to exclude some of them. And there is nothing much left to decide that. Okay, so to determine validity of categorical solutions, there are 2 ways. One way is by using the Venn diagram. The other is using the 6 rules. Now we see the Venn diagram, 3 circles, because we have 3 terms. And we first diagram the 2 premises, first universal propositions, and then particular propositions. If they are both universal or both particular, then whichever you like could work. And also, after we do this, we do not put the conclusion on the diagram. We just try to read it from the diagram to see whether the conclusion is already entailed in the information of the premises. So this is just from the textbook, how to do the A proposition and the modern and the traditional interpretations, E proposition, I proposition, E proposition. And the tricky point here is if we do not know where the circle should be in regarding to the other circle, well, if we do not know the circled cross should be in regarding to the other set, for example, I'm thinking about no M a P, I supposed to have put something inside M, outside P. But here we do not know its relationship to S, so I put it on the edge of S. If it is on the edge of S, you can make the conclusion that, okay, it's not about S, it's about the other 2 terms. And again, the modern traditional distinction does not affect particular propositions. So we have the same for I proposition and O propositions. Again, for example, this one, some P and not M, we consider the 2 circles M and P. Some P and not M, there's something inside P, outside M, but we do not know its relationship with S, so I put it on the edge of S. Okay, so this is Venn diagram. Some people told me that they didn't feel quite comfortable with the diagrams. In that case, you need to rely on the rules. There are 6 rules. If a solution does not break any of the rules, means it fulfills all the 6 rules, then it is valid. But if it breaks any of the rules, then it's invalid. The first 2 rules are about the distribution. The rule 3 to 5 about how many, about the quality of the premises and conclusions. And rule 6 is very special because it gives the distinction between the modern and traditional interpretation of the rules. And for each of the rules, we have a name associated with it, except rule 2. There are 2 names. If rule 2 is broken because of the major term is distributed in the conclusion but not in the premise, then it's illicit major. If it is a minor term that is distributed in the conclusion but not in the premise, then it's illicit minor. And in the modern interpretation, we know that rule 6 says from two universals, we can never get a particular, because from the shadows in the diagram, you can never get a cross from nowhere. But in traditional interpretation, because we have those circled cross, so you can see the rule here is changed to be two universal premises can only have a particular conclusion. If first the syllogism is provisionally valid, and then the major and minor terms are not empty. Okay, again, this might be one of the difficult parts of all the questions, how to translate the ordinary language into categorical syllogism. We have some techniques like eliminating the superfluous words, using synonymous, using class complements, using a version of version and the contraposition, eliminating certain prefixes, the nan in this, we all put them into none. And also, we need some techniques from what we studied from chapter 5, how to paraphrase those language. And also, if I need to translate one of the premises into two propositions in conjunction, then here we translate the original argument into multiple arguments. And remember that if any one of the corresponding syllogisms is valid, then the original is valid. You do not need everything to be valid. Just any one of them can make the original to be valid. And also we talk about the antonyms. That is, arguments with missing premises, missing conclusion, or it can even miss both. But in the case that it misses both, we need some more background to suggest us what is missing. And again, maybe one of the most useful techniques is using the conversion of version and the contraposition. So we can see some examples. Some nan B are not nan A, O nan C, or nan B, O C or A. How to do it? Now, we know that OCRA is the conclusion. It cannot be changed. So A must be the major term, C must be the major term. We first consider the proposition containing A and B. Some nan B are not nan C. Actually, it is the contraposition of some A and not B. Contraposition, put nan to both of the terms and switch them. So for A propositions, contraposition, for A and O propositions, contrapositions give you valid arguments. And that's why we can use it to change the first premise and also the second premise, O nan C and nan B. And that's OB as C. Okay, so here's another example. Some nan B as C. Again, this time we'll also look at the conclusion first. O nan C and nan A. That is OA as C. And also we look at not OB at A. this by using the square O, some B and not A. And also some nan B a C. And I first use the conversion of I preposition, some C and then B, and then obversion, some C and not B. So in doing this kind of translation, sometimes you need to use those techniques more than once. And look at this. So if it is in other language, some philosophers are not intelligent. Philosophers, minor term. Intelligent people, major term. So happy people is the middle term. So always conclusion first, some P and not I. And then we find the major term, intelligent people. So only intelligent people are not unhappy. This is the major premise. And which means all people who are not unhappy are intelligent people. How to do with only. And after we get this, all people who are not unhappy are intelligent. This means all happy people are intelligent people. Double negation. So OHI. And then we have the manner premise, not every philosopher is happy. Then it means some philosophers are not happy. You can either use the square to first find every philosopher is happy and then put the negation to it. Or you can just use your ordinary understanding. Not everyone is happy means someone is not happy. This is, okay, you can speak English. This is quite natural to you. But these are the two ways. One is the logical way, the other is the way you get from the understanding of the language. And putting that together, we got the translation of this one. Okay, you see, a question like this requires multiple steps and it may take you longer time to deal with. So in the exam, sometimes you need to face trade-offs and leave those questions to be in the last part to deal with. Or at least if you do not have enough time to do it, you can still make a lucky guess. Okay, so chapter 3 talks about the diagramming. And the functions of diagramming could be show the structure. Oh, yes, John, please.
Hey, so I was just confused on the last one. Would you go back one slide?
Sure.
I was confused about the first premise, all H or I. So what are we?
All happy people are intelligent people. This is from the sentence, only intelligent people are not unhappy, right? Okay, look at the conclusion.
Okay.
Some philosophers are not intelligent. Which one is the major term?
Intelligent.
Yes. Intelligent is the major term. Major term always in the first premise. So
okay, but that's my bad. I was thinking that all H or I came from not every philosopher is happy.
No. No, that would be, wow, that would be horrible because in that case, you are not considering a single proposition's translation, you are considering inference between propositions, that would be disastrous.
Yeah.
Luckily, it can be just solved by identifying the ordering.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. So the function of diagramming, showing the structure, highlighting the connection, and if it is enemy, finding the missing premises or missing conclusion. So the steps are quite easy. Just number the statements as they appear, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then draw the connection using the arrows. Now, what is difficult in this part is we need to understand some key concepts about what is independent, what is dependent. Premises are independent when the falsity of one of the premises would not nullify any support the others would give to the conclusion. So it just means that those premises support the conclusions in their own way. Like, remember the example I gave in class, your cat does not like you because first, you wear yellow clothes, second, you steal her tuna fish for food. So these are two different reasons. Even you wear red clothes today, but you still steal her fruit, your cat still hates you. Okay, a cat may hate you for no reason. So, but you know the idea is whether those premises need to work together so it can help you to establish the conclusion. Dependent is they need to work together, and the falsity of one dependent premise weakens the support that the other dependent premises give to the conclusion. So the easiest example, the one that we are most familiar with, is actually the categorical systems, right? Why we have the rules like distributed the middle? Because we need those two propositions, two premises to have certain connections so they can give you the conclusion where the where the minor term and the major term are connected. So categorical systems are having dependent premises, and that's why they should be represented in linked diagrams. These are the conceptual relations you can draw. And also we have serial diagrams. One proposition pointing to another and another still pointing to still another. So the middle ones work as premise for the next argument, but conclusion for the previous one. And extended arguments. That is, we have the previous kinds of diagrams putting together, which could be as complex as you wish. And you see, in those cases, in the divergent diagram, in the serial diagram, in the extended diagram, sometimes it looks to you that they have multiple conclusions. Well, you may wonder why, because in the first chapter we studied each argument only have one conclusion. And this is actually still true because here the diagram gives you the visual presentation for more than one argument. There are multiple arguments, so there are multiple conclusions. It's just the case they're putting together to show you the links between those propositions. So the very last part, I hope you still can remember the fallacies, flawed reasonings, problematic reasonings, and two kinds of theses, formal and informal. To be careful that formal theses are restricted to deductive arguments, but informal theses can exist in both the deductive and inductive arguments. Some informal theses, they may have valid forms. For example, begging the question, false dichotomy, slippery slope. Slippery slope can also be valid. It's just the case that it's unsound. And we have the 6 classes, the based on personal attacks, based on emotional appeals, generalization, false cause, unwarranted assumption, and diversion. Everything you need about those concepts, the definitions you can find in the file I give you on icon, the summaries of the informal theses. What I want to remind you here is just some careful distinctions. First is between the hasty generalization and the biased sample. What's the difference? We all make inference from a smaller group to a large population. But why one is hasty generalization and one is biased sample?
I think generally the bias sample has some reason.
Yeah, some causal connection between the feature of the sample and the feature you want to give to the large population.
It's like such a small sample.
Yeah, hasty generalization is you cannot find such causal connection. Then no such relation can be found. So you can only say it's problematic because the size of the sample. So biased sample, if we ignore its special feature, it could be hasty generalization. But hasty generalization, unless we give them such relations, it cannot be biased sample. But of course, in the exam, you will always see the most clear examples. If some case can be classified in both, in some sense it's hard to be decided, you will see that in the 4 choices for the MC question, only one of these 2 will appear. So no worry about that. Also, red herring and strawman. What's the difference? They all talk about something somehow diverted from the original argument. Yes, John, please.
Like red herring is like ignorance of the person's argument.
John, you're frozen. Or am I frozen? Oh my gosh. Could you hear me?
We can hear you. John got very frozen.
Okay. John,
You can hear me.
No, now I can hear you. Earlier, one of us must be frozen.
Yeah. I was saying red herring is like ignoring the other person's argument, and then straw man is like a truncation of their argument. So like messing with it so that it's not actually, it's being uncharitable.
Yes, straw man is distorting the other person's argument. It's like you put something into that person's mouth, which he or she actually didn't say. So red herring is a more general, just diverts the topic from the original one, but not saying that, hey, John says something, but the case is some and some. I say some point and I claim John says that, but actually John says quite a different thing. John, you're still raising your hand. Question or no? Okay.
Sorry, I just haven't been on Zoom. It's been a while.
So the last one I want to remind you is the distinction between poisoning the well versus ad hominem abusive or ad hominem circumstantial. In poisoning the well, you can see either the features of ad hominem abusive or circumstantial. It could be attack the person's character, virtues, or could be seeing that something about this person's background. But the main point about poisoning the well is there is a very clear temporal indicator saying that, hey, he's going to say something, but before that, I need to warn you something. So it should be clear that that person hasn't had the chance to make his or her point. So this is about the timing, not about the content, because the content could be either abusive or circumstantial. So, okay, I think that's all I want to say. And before I give you the chance to ask questions, let us be sure that we all know those information. We're going to have the final exam on Thursday afternoon, 3 to 5 p.m. It's in the business building, PBB, 03 together. In this classroom, the business building, you can find it in the Google map, not far away from EPB. Please bring your number 2 pencil. And also, you do not necessarily have to bring your student ID, but you must remember the name. You must remember the number of your student ID because we need to use the Scantron, the grade sheet, and without your ID, your score would be missing, and that would be terrible. Okay, so any questions? Okay, chat. Yes, definitely. I will put the slides on icon just after the meeting. No worry. And okay, for those of you not in my session, so you cannot access to my icon site, you can just email me. My email address is in the course syllabus. You can email me asking for this slides or any previous slides I mentioned. I can just send to you.
On the final practice, can you go over 36, please?
Yes, sure. Okay, so let me get to the, okay, I need to stop sharing and then sharing again. Practice. Screen share. Okay, this one. I think it's right. 36, right?
Yeah, I just like don't know how to tell based on like the mood and figure if it's provisionally valid.
Okay, so let me get it right. Okay, so identify the provisionally valid proposition. Here we need to draw the Venn diagrams for each.
So when it says provisionally valid, like what exactly is that? Like, how is that different from just valid?
Okay, provisionally valid is we have a circled cross to make the propositional that the categorical syllogism.
So is it just like valid under traditional interpretation? Is that like kind of what it means?
Provisional valid must be using the traditional interpretation, but also we need the validity come from a circled cross. So it is valid because we have something under examination that if the term is not empty, then we can have it valid. But if the term is empty, it's not valid. I think maybe we need to draw the diagram, right? How to do that? Let me see whether I can draw. Can you see me join the lines here?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now you see the three circles as P. Sorry for my drawing. So what is AAI 1? 1 means OM a P, O as a M, some as a P, right? So let's do OM a P in traditional interpretation. OM a P is this. Can you see this clearly? Oh my gosh, yeah. This is OM a P, right? And secondly, I have OS a M, OS a M, and here look at here. I have a circled cross that must be in this middle area, overlapping area between S and P. And now you see that if this is a real cross, not the circled one, then it's valid. But if the terms are empty, finally we decide nothing is in S. S means the category of round square, or means the evil God. God by definition is benevolent. So we have a lot of empty terms like that, or the unicorns. Well, in that case, there wouldn't be anything. So the validity of this kind of syllogism is undetermined. But we know the only condition is whether S is empty or not. And in that case, we call it provisionally valid. So that's A.
Can you just explain that last part one more time about provisionally valid? Like Like just the last part when you were talking about the assumption X.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you quite clearly. You mean?
Can you just like repeat like that last thing you said?
Oh, provisionally valid.
Yeah.
Provisionally valid is whether it is valid depends on the existential import, whether the categories they refer to are empty or not. If they contain something, then I can remove the circle from the cross and you can get it's valid or some SLP. If there's nothing, then I need to remove the circled cross. And in that case, it's invalid. But whether it is valid or invalid needs to be further examined of the content of the words. And so far, we only know that provisionally there might be something in this part. So that's what we call provisional valid. It is only from the case of traditional interpretation, not modern interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions or other questions for the practice final? No? Yeah, start sharing for the moment. So everyone have done the practice final, right? Finished? No problem. Oh, cool. Terrific. Or any other questions you want to ask?
Is there a best practice for going about the questions that give you like E blank A and then the mood? Like, is there a best way to figure those out? Or is it just look at the mood, set it up, try to figure out what's missing that makes it valid?
Well, for me, I think the easiest way is just writing out everything in mood and figure. But you have some techniques just by looking at the rules. For example, if you have I 3, it just must be invalid. Why? I 3.
It's not undistributed metal.
Yes, exactly. Or EOO, valid or invalid.
You can't have two
Exclusive.
negative premises, so it's invalid.
Yes. Yeah, that's the idea. We have several ways to help you to deal with that. But if you cannot find that out by using these rules, finally you have to draw the Venn diagram. Hopefully you don't have to draw 4, but in principle, who knows?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Dominic.
Yeah, I was just looking at the practice exam, and what John was just asking was numbers 32.
Yes. Yeah. I realized. Yeah, I realized. Thank you. I think John also asked this question in class, right?
Yeah, I'm nervous about him.
Okay. So, good question. Others?
Does the final have the same subheadings as the practice final?
Yes.
Yeah.
always the same.
Okay.
Same level of difficulty, same distribution of the chapters.
Okay.
So if there might be one or two difficult questions in the final, but that's only one or two among 100. So
Yeah.
you should be worried. And also, by the way, just happy to let you know that we have figured out your online homework grade, and most of the people get the 10 points out of 10. So we try to dismiss all the problematic issues about the technical issues, the access problems. So as long as you try to do it every week, you are fine. No worry.
Is there online homework due tonight?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
everything is done. And yeah, and if you want to know your participation grade, your homework grade, your online homework grade, just email me. Yeah, I have all those in my secret book. Other questions about the exam, about logic, about philosophy, about Professor David Stern, or about Cassie? Okay, so you may leave if you have no further questions, but if you want to chat, you can stay. I will be here for a while until everyone is gone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too.